Good morning. So my name is Justin. I'm the co-president of ZeroXPark, an organization you might have heard of. So this is the last talk before lunch I've heard. So I'll go with like the weird experimental one. So the question I want to investigate today is what can we still miss? These are things we won't miss. UX, throughput, wallets, funding models, the collective intelligence and the funding models are piling up on these problems. The real questions, the one that is about missing out on something, would be, are there 10,000 to 100x outcome for Ethereum and cryptography that we could completely miss because we have the wrong narrative and culture? And so that leads to basically the core question, which is, what is the core narrative and product affordances of advanced cryptography or crypto economic or blockchains or whatever? We don't really have consensus yet on how to call the top level category. The shorter version would be, what's this all about? And these questions come from an investigation of mine, which led to the conclusion that Ethereum spans a universe with basically a single verb, which is to own. So whether it's owning sovereign currencies, art, game items, owning privately for privacy, publicly for status symbols, or as a group together, it's all about own-ish derivatives. And this is not a function of the technology. It's a function of the narrative and the way we talk about the product affordances of this technology. And the idealized persona of Ethereum would be the Homo economicus. It's a concept from economics. It's a perfectly rational, profit-maximizing human. The vocabulary of the Economicus would be depth, margin, pool, grant, staking, yield, economic security, and so forth. And the thing is, as you might know, most people are not economicus. It's a spectrum. We have a little bit of it inside each of us. But I would say that these things only appeal to a very specific part of the population. And so you might ask me, okay, well, aren't we already going beyond ownership? You know, like there's consumer crypto. We're trying to go beyond the hyper-financialization. And I would say that the issue is, if the centerpiece of your core metaphysics is that if the centerpiece of your core metaphysics is that ownership is the key part of this technology, it's going to be really hard to appeal to the rest of the population, right? So when Homo economicus goes out there and tries to find PMF, they'll say stuff like, oh, you know, the thing video games have been missing all along is that gamers want true ownership. You know, like the thing they really need is to be able to own their items and sell them. The issue with social media is that creators have not been able to monetize their content and token gate their community. And you can kind of like apply this logic to anything out there. And how do we bring other people here? You know, like people talk about, okay, how do we onboard the next billion users? And I don't think there is a billion economicus out there, right? So how do we bring the rest of the people out there? Where does the massive backslash against the technology come from? Because if you think about it, it doesn't come from the product affordances. Once again, it's about the narrative. And so, this comes from like a small personal crusade of mine over the last year. I've been working with artists and designers on trying to convince them that Ethereum is a fundamentally new medium, right? The same way radio to film kind of like changed everything. You can ask any media theorist out there. Ethereum is a fundamentally new computational medium. And when you talk to these people, and when you like inquire within yourself, what is it that it brings on the table? It's not about monetizing their work. It's not about NFT. It's really not about anything related to owning at all. Because it turns out that Ethereum true product affordances are extremely relevant to worlds. Worlds which are the object of study and creation of designer, artist, and basically anyone that is in the business of putting something creatively together. And one of the things ZeroXPark has been working on, we've instigated it and been researching this idea of autonomous worlds, which you might have heard of. I won't go too much into details, but it's the idea that worlds want to be free of their gods and have like an expensive definition of what a world is. It could be a narrative, could be a game, could be a story. Worlds wants to be free of their J.K. Rowlings, Blizzards, or Epic, because they want to escape the tragedy of the creator. For something to be truly alive, it needs to have a life of its own. And so I want to insist that these are not worlds that happen to be on-chain, but worlds that wouldn't exist otherwise. And so if you say, hey, like here's something new that wouldn't exist otherwise, what is the core product affordance that enables this? And one way I've been kind of like explaining this to people is that Ethereum for the first time enables application to be truly autonomous. Computers are really powerful today, but they've always been in need of their daddy in order to remain alive. Like, there is no way today, apart from blockchains, to have programs that can't be stopped. And so if you lace down these affordances, right, actually you get persistence, you get programs that can't help but be composable. For the first time, you get true secrets on the internet, right? Blockchain is funding most of the research on zero-knowledge proof, and it's kind of incredible that so far, before today, we haven't been able to have secrets on the internet that are known by no one, right? There's always someone that put it out there. So from the perspective of worlds, there's actually a lot of very interesting affordances of Ethereum. And when you talk about it this way, I went to a bunch of conferences and I work with a lot of studios. Their eyes light up because nobody has spent time explaining. As I truly sat them down and be like, hey, the core affordance of Ethereum is true autonomy, right? The narrative out there is the core affordance is true ownership or sovereign money or so forth. And so John Huizinga wrote this book called Homo Ludens a while ago, and the idea was that play is a central element of culture. It actually predates culture. And he introduces this concept of Homo Ludens, which is man the player. Ludens in Latin can't really be translated. It means play, society, practice. And so the idea would be, okay, how do we narrate and describe Ethereum as something for the Homo Ludens, not just for the Economicus, right? Because I stipulate that there are way more Ludens than Economicus out there. If you truly want to bring the next 1 billion people, you have to think a little bit about, okay, what's the narrative around all of this? And one reason I started investigating the affordances from this perspective is I sat down at some point and I realized, okay, the truly incredible thing with this little project you might have heard called Dark Forest is that it used Ethereum and its affordances from a totally different perspective than the one you're used to. So for those of you that don't know, Dark Forest was an on-chain game. So it was basically a game that ran entirely on Ethereum. Its state and logic was running on-chain. It was also one of the first ZK app in production, right? Even before Tornado Cash. And so it used Ethereum for its autonomy, and it used ZK for its true secrets. And it was kind of incredible because it relied on Ethereum and the technology from a totally different perspective than the one you're used to, right? It used Ethereum as the first computer that doesn't need its daddy, and ZK as an enabler of true secrets. And I think people, I don't think people have truly internalized this, and that's why it was kind of awesome. And it really reminds me of the history of parallel scientific computing. So when people started playing like 3D games, Wolfenstein, Doom, and stuff like that, there were a bunch of manufacturers out there that were building graphics cards. And graphics cards were accelerators, right, for graphics. So this is a shader. It's basically a little program that colors every single pixel on the screen. And the program here is quite simple, is you apply a gradient and you have a checkboard pattern. But the thing that's interesting with shaders is it computes each pixel individually, because each pixel doesn't need its neighbors in order to know what color it is. And so it's fundamentally about like making parallel computing really quickly. But at the beginning, people didn't think about it this way. The narrative around graphics card was that it would accelerate graphics. So that's what happens for like the first few years. And then at some point, some scientists that were doing high performance computing were like, I have these partial differential equations. And it turns out that if I lay down their initial condition as an image, and then I program a shader that applies this equation, I can solve it much faster, right? They kind of like hacked graphics cards. And turns out it was parallel computing all along. But the narrative of these accelerators was that they were graphics cards. And so it took like multiple years to reach that conclusion. And now we know what happened. NVIDIA is one of the biggest companies in the world. They kind of like, you can see till 2014 and 15, that's before CUDA. That's before they really embraced the fact that they were building parallel computers all along. And so it's not always obvious at the beginning what the true product affordances of technology is. And so if you think about it this way, like, okay, the affordance is we're building a graphics application-specific integrated circuit, right? A graphics card. And what we can get out of this is Doom. We can get shadows, we can get fast blur. But if you do some shape rotation, you're like, well, actually, what we're doing is parallel computing. You still get graphics, but now you enable things like machine learning, scientific computing, and so forth. And the difference between this and that is not really about the technology, although, you know, they invested a bunch of time in the SDKs and stuff like that. It's mostly about the narrative around what the technology is in the first place. And we don't really know what this is all about. I think that a lot of us out there are building things thinking, oh, like the thing we've been doing is putting true ownership on the internet. And we just don't really know yet what these computers are about. And when we went from Bitcoin to Ethereum, I think like a naive understanding of this transition is that we just added a virtual machine to digital money. It's like, yeah, we're just gonna make programmable money. And it really reminds me of it's kind of like this funny, in the history of television, there was this thing called Texaco Star Theater, which was the first TV show. And it was just a radio show that was filmed. So like for the first year on TV, people would watch radio shows that were filmed. And it's kind of the same now, like, hey man, like we're just gonna make really programmable money now that we have a programmable blockchain. Like the thing we did when we went from Bitcoin to Ethereum is we added a virtual machine. And so if we sit down and we think, okay, like what are the affordances that unlock something like dark forest? It doesn't seem like it's programmable money, even if it's what we've been talking about for literally like 10 years. And it's not an Economicus affordance or narrative, it's something quite different. And so, there's no consensus yet on like what are the true affordances of Ethereum. Like the whole point of this talk is to be like a little bit controversial and say, hey, actually, this is not what you think it is. It's usually a way for people to be generative, to tell them, hey, you thought it was X all along, but it turns out it's Y. And so I have an idea of what I think the true affordances are. You might have a different idea. It doesn't really matter. What I want to get to is kind of like questioning the core narrative that is about ownership. So I would say that one of the two things we've been working on for the last 10 years is true autonomy. So whether it's through consensus, smart contracts, data availability, for the first time we've built a computer that is truly autonomous. The second thing, with all the investments we've made in terms of talent and capital into advanced cryptography, is that we've basically invented true secrets, right? There has never been a secret on the internet before that wasn't known to anyone. That you could possibly do something with. So with true autonomy and true secrets, you can actually build kind of a lot of stuff, right? You can get true ownership. You can get true private ownership. But you can also get things like autonomous worlds, censorship resistance, and a bunch of other things we haven't really invented yet. But if you swap it, if you kind of go out there and say, like the narrative, like the core affordance of this technology is that it's about true ownership, or as some people have tried to meme it, read, write, own. Like, oh, what Web3 has been about all along is that now you can own stuff on the internet. If this is the core technology, then it makes sense that the things you get out of this is that, well, I want to own this song, I want to trade this item, I want to buy this art, or I want to sell my content. And this shows like really viscerally that it's quite important, like that the core affordance of something is going to lead to the products that are built on top of it, right? So the idea behind this talk is to introduce this little thesis of mine, which is the Ludens thesis, and it's that there's a very small possibility that we can redefine Ethereum as a cultural object, an object for worlds, playfulness, and beauty. I'm very much not confident on this, but it seems like it could be one of these 10,000x to 100,000x outcome we could completely miss on because we're not thinking about it. And it would basically see Ethereum and advanced cryptography as the road towards the internet being truly alive and generative, not just an internet where you can own stuff. And people have described Ethereum as the world computer. I think right now it's basically the world's financial computer. Could we redefine it as the world computer with capital W, the computer for worlds? And build things with computers that can't be shut down, data that can't be siloed, identities that can't be forged, and programs that can't help but be composable. And of course, it's not as caricatural as I make it. A bunch of people see Ethereum as an engine for credible commitment, as an economically secure data availability layer, as a censorship-resistant computer. But it is still the case that the dominant narrative is that we've been building true ownership all along. And so we really don't want Ethereum's success to be capped by its narrative, because that would be really sad. We would have worked so hard, and then in the end, the thing that capped our success was just, the way we talked about it. So as a closing note, like, how much do I really believe in this? Well, I'd say I have like a 10%. Okay, I said 1% earlier. I don't really know. What matters is that I don't think this is that likely that we'll be able to redefine the thing that far in. Currently, the narratives are like very well enshrined. But it's kind of like an interesting questioning to sit down and think about, okay, was the core narrative correct? And can we still change it? Because it would be a dope future to be in a world where, oh, the most important words run on Ethereum, and just like film, Ethereum is seen as a major new medium, and $ETH, the token, is just a footnote. It might even disappear altogether. Like, there is nothing out there that says consensus has to be about capital. Consensus is just about incentives. It just so happens that capital is a very good liquid incentive, but we could all have a little box in our head that explodes if our validator signs wrong block, and it will work out. Although that would be a weird future as well. That's it from me. You can find me on Twitter and Telegram at Justin Glibert. And I can take some questions because it seems like I have some time left. Thank you. Yeah, question there.
Hi. If the thesis is correct, do you think this could be inevitable?
So I don't think it would be inevitable, because the thing that is kind of interesting if you look at the history of technology is that a lot of the time, like, the narrative and the thesis drives what the technology ends up being. I think that a lot of technologists out there think that, ooh, everything is going to be invented and it doesn't matter the way we deploy it, so we should just build it. But I think that if you're a thoughtful technologist, you actually have to really think hard about the deployment and the narrative around technology itself. So I think that the thesis could be correct, but I don't think it's inevitable at all. There's actually like a very vicious narrative where you amplify the original ideas till you kind of like drive out everybody else, essentially. And that has happened before. Oh, there's one there.
Hey, do you, I mean, like, how much do you think we should care about finding a narrative versus just building things that people want?
How do you know what people want?
Just like changing things for the better.
Yeah.
Usually that's what people want.
I think it's correct. Like, I think there both can be something people want, and also, like, you can think, okay, imagine, like, if you've done some machine learning, imagine a parameter space. You know, you have good solutions, bad solutions, and usually going towards what people want, like, allows you to move a little bit around where you are, but you might end up on like local maximas or local minimas, where you keep optimizing for what people want, but you can't drastically redefine what the technology is in the first place. And the nice thing is, most of the time for technology, there has been some like truly random people coming in and like changing what it's all about and escaping those local maxima. But the thing that is interesting with crypto is that because it's technology plus culture all together, and the community is very tight in the loop of defining what the technology is, it's actually much easier than in other industries to be stuck at the local maximum. So I think it's generally good to build people like things people want. It would be worse to build things people don't want. So it seems like initially is a pretty good strategy. But I would say injecting some randomness and saying, hey, actually, like, once every year, let's sit down and think about what the true affordances are and do something else could be interesting. I also think that competing narratives are good because they make it such that we can explore different parts of the evolutionary tree. If there's one core narrative, you tend to stay around your lane all the time. Yeah. Great. Thanks, everybody.